Welcome to Feelings and Other F Words. I'm Dr. Daryl Appleton, and this week we are talking about the science of fucking up. That's right. We are talking about why we screw up, how our brain registers this as a screw up. Does it have a different part of the brain that can register a mistake? And then what happens? We'll be talking about ways to bounce back. We'll be talking about the difference between post-traumatic stress versus post-traumatic growth and all these buzzwords like growth mindset and grit and all these things we like to use a lot but don't actually know what they mean. We're going to be talking about all of that. And it was interesting because when I was diving into the research, it was very much in worlds that I am incredibly familiar with. High performers, high achievers, professional athletes. There was lots and lots about performance under pressure. And sometimes the opposite of that, of fuck-ups under pressure, which there's no judgment. We've all choked. We've all had the yips. Like, we've all been there. We have all stepped up to that proverbial plate and swung and missed. So I don't care who you are. This is a judgment-free zone. We have been there. My question is, what happens in the brain? Why does this happen? And the research shows a few different things. So there's something about the brain where, I don't know how else to say this, and I've recorded this a few times now, and I keep saying it because it's the only way that I can describe it. Sometimes your brain is just a cocky idiot, right? Sometimes your brain is that part of you who gets up on stage at karaoke night after a few drinks and is like, I got this, put on Whitney Houston. And you have no business singing anything from Whitney Houston, right? Like, there's just like, that's kind of like, there's studies that show that our brain actually thinks it is more competent and confident than it actually is. Like 60% of novices are more likely to misjudge their skills. And this is important because it's a good thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Again, context matters, scope and spectrum matter, but it makes us want to try new things and get out of our comfort zone. Now, what happens after that is actually incredibly important, because if you swing and miss, if you get up there and try to hit that high note and you really just don't, then what you do next matters, because research also shows that after we fuck up, the brain starts this rewiring process. There's actually a part of the brain that registers things as a mistake. And what it starts to do, again, my words, not research words, is it almost like hones in on it. It draws this circle around and it's like this motherfucker right here, never again. But what happens in that rewiring, because again, rewiring isn't good or bad. Rewiring is just different. We can rewire it as, I will never sing again in front of people at karaoke. I have now a traumatic experience around my karaokeing. Or it will rewire it in a post-traumatic growth kind of way of, that sucked, but next time I'm going to pick a different song. Or you know what? Whitney Houston better watch the fuck out because I'm coming for her crown. I'm going to practice every day. So like, how we experience failure, how we experience fuck-ups will 100% influence how our brain is rewired. And that to me is important because that's a cognitive decision. You may not be able to fuck up or not, right? Like maybe you're overestimating your skill and there's nothing we can necessarily do about that. I want you to try. I want you to take that swing. But like afterwards, the stories we tell ourselves matter. So, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. I can never go back to that bar again. That's a story you're telling yourself. And your brain will rewire into that direction of like, never again. Can't go there, can't go to Shady McSell's to Miners, like that's just not a bar we can ever go back to again because like, you know what happened. Or it's like, I'm going back next week and I'm going to laugh about it. I'm going to make a bunch of friends and I'm going to try it again. And maybe that becomes my thing. Maybe that's like literally and figuratively my jam. I don't know. But there's something about trying and succeeding that has research built around it. And there were studies done, especially again around athletes, that looked at succeeding when no one was looking. And it was this idea that athletes, especially golfers, I think it was golfers that they looked at, when they were testing golfers and their performance under pressure, like a high stakes shot, and they said, okay, what we want you to do is just do what you do naturally versus I want you to think about your stroke. Think about where your hands are. Think about the position of your feet. They actually found that golfers who performed poorly or more poorly were actually closely monitoring each step of their swing versus letting it happen. And there's this flow state that sometimes comes when people get up there and they perform really well. And I'm not even just talking about athletes or performers at this point, but somebody even giving a presentation, somebody running a meeting, somebody that's just like effortlessly doing a thing that's a little bit more high stakes, that they are in a flow state. And they get there because they practice it. And we know practice doesn't necessarily make perfect, but practice makes for more practice, more professionalism. And when we practice, what we're doing is actually a cognitive behavioral exercise of putting ourselves in the position of a high stakes position and pretending that we're there and acting as if. So that way, when the brain gets up there on stage or in front of that meeting, you've already been there and the brain actually feels a little bit more comfortable, which is wild to me, right? Imagery, imagination, those types of exercises can 100% help how you feel about things. So there's something to be said about allowing the brain to take over to do what it does best. But before you do that, practice is key. You cannot get away from practicing. The other thing that research found, and I am a huge fan of, absolutely huge fan, is this idea that picking a mantra to get you through tough things is key. So with a lot of athletes, again, that I've worked with, or even being an athlete myself, being, college athlete, playing basketball, that idea of a mantra of like, okay, you miss a shot, the mantra is like, you'll get the next one, next shot, focus on the next shot, get there, get back on defense. Again, whatever it is. For those of you not sports minded, like, we will find another mantra for you. But having a mantra when things get tough is wildly important. If you do not have a mantra, I do not know what you're doing. Go get a mantra. Pause this, find a mantra, write it down on a sticky note. If you guys are watching this online, obviously we're all online on YouTube. I have my sticky note, my emotional support sticky note, my Post-it. I love Post-it. Post-it, call me. We need to do some work together because I have Post-its everywhere. But my Post-it now in my high stakes environment of being a chaotic mom, high performing chaotic mom, is do the first thing first. So that's my next shot, get back on defense now. It's do the first thing first. When I get very overwhelmed, when I'm in a high stakes place, when I'm giving a lecture, what's the first thing I need to talk about to make it make sense? When I'm at work, when I'm at home, when I'm with my kids, like, what's the first thing that needs to be taken care of? And it helps settle me, right? That mantra right there, it becomes automatic and it allows my brain to settle into a process. And it distracts me from overthinking, because other research says that when we overthink, we fuck up more. When you are so hyper-focused on the details, when you are so hyper-focused on the outcome, when you are so hyper-focused at looking at everybody's faces in the audience, your brain is not going to be able to focus on the thing that you're trying to do and all the observations that it's making. I was giving a lecture at Brown the other day, and the beginning of it didn't go as well as I wanted it to. The beginning of my lectures are never good because I'm usually introducing myself, and I never actually know how to do that, but that's besides the point. It's for therapy later on. But it was interesting because I was so distracted because people kept coming in the beginning because, that's what happens. Like, you start on time and people show up late. But there was something interesting about it. I found myself pulling from what I wanted to say, and I was too distracted. And I started to hyper-focus on this one face in the audience. So if you're listening, sorry if I was staring at you. I was recentering myself on purpose because I needed to get back to what I practiced saying. I needed to get back to what my brain knew it wanted to say and tap into all my deep knowledge about the topic at hand, because guess what? I'm the motherfucking expert in the room. Like, I know this stuff, but I was so distracted by external things, like I couldn't get there. So I think that that's incredibly important, of knowing that mantra, knowing and getting there to that mantra. There's also research that shows that we need to trust our brains to execute what it's trained to do. So again, operating outside of conscious control can actually lead to better results. That flow state that we're talking about. I remember reading a book in college. My coach made me read it. I've referenced this book so much, and at the time I thought it was so dumb. So those of you out there that are reading books that you're like, this has no impact on my life, guess what? You're going to start a podcast 20 years later and be like, you know that book in college? But this book called Mind Gym, which again, I hated at the time because I was like, this is dumb. It's not. Talked about this idea of getting into what they called a white moment. My air quotes are out, this white moment of like everything just goes right. It flows. Like you're hitting every shot. You're making every play. In the real world, this translates to I'm saying what I want to say. I'm being articulate. And this isn't even in like high stakes business. This could be in a conversation that you're having with your significant other. That's high stakes of like, I'm hitting all my points. I'm responding appropriately. Like I'm ready to go and I'm not overanalyzing or overfeeling, because that's the other thing. Overanalysis isn't just in like the physical, like I was talking about, of these people walking in and me being like hyper focused on who the fuck are these people and why are they walking in late? I didn't think that. I was just hyper focused on the movement. But also the emotions of like, oh my God, I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I'm letting my feelings take over what it is that I'm trying to say or do. And I think all of that is really important because, again, once we understand why we mess up, right, or reasons why we could mess up and try to avoid them, that other part of like how we recover from that, the stories that we're telling about that resilience, again, one of those buzzwords, but very true, of how we perceive and view it is the next step of being very important. So first step is understanding why it happens, how we get pulled out of focus. That next step is, again, like afterwards, after that presentation, I had to sit back and be like, you know what? 80%, great. I was actually very happy with it. 20% got a little fucked up. And 80-20 is my rule. I feel happy with that. I feel okay with that. That intro piece, I know it's not really great. I should have started the lecture a couple minutes later because I could have given people more time to sit. I could have done things differently, but overall, I'm happy. And if I were to fuck up, I wanted to fuck up on the introduction of myself rather than the content that I know very well. So like that was the story I told myself. So give yourself a second of how are you framing it to yourself after the fuck up happens? That is important. And again, that neuroplasticity, how your brain rewires itself, it will become a story. It will become a pathway that you will reference with other fuck ups. So again, how you frame your fuck ups to yourself, to your child, to your teammate, to the guy at work, like it will impact future fuck ups and how you view them. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? I think so. And also we see that like failure is actually a teacher. When you look at Carol Dweck, when you look at Angela Duckworth, you know, this is your growth mindset. This is your resilience, your grit people. They actually show in their research that this growth mindset, the story that you tell, boosts recovery by 30%. So truly, 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 failure is a teacher. It is not a death sentence. And that's so important for us to know because our brain is hardwired to avoid things that feel painful, including emotional pain. Now, what do we do about this? The takeaways, where are we going with this? This is the advice I'd give you if you're sitting in front of me. First of all, I would validate you. Everybody's fucked up. If you're trying not to fuck up, though, you're putting your energy in the wrong place. Point blank, period. The goal isn't not to mess up. The goal isn't not to screw up. In my mind, the goal is very much for us to tell the appropriate story to ourselves. Again, realistic. Let's not go into a place of like, that was amazing. I was perfect and have no notes. But also on the other side of that, not tear yourself apart. It needs to be somewhere bell curve middle and finding a process to do that and allowing yourself to heal from that so you can do things better next time. So you can learn from that. You can scaffold from that. Like that to me is important because too often out there, I'm going to get on a soapbox. I'm really trying not to, but too often we see things in social media and like just, you know, entertainment culture of like, it's okay not to be perfect. It's okay to show up as is. Like that's not necessarily the message either. Like I'm not trying to promote hyper perfectionism. There's no such thing as perfect. But also like we do need to try. There does need to be effort. There does need to be accountability of self. And that's a very important piece of the puzzle here that I think sometimes we forget about. That's why people like me exist, to hold you accountable, to tell you it's okay, and to give you action steps on what to do next. To the action steps, then we go. Here are 3 tips that I usually give people to turn perceived fuck ups into wins. The first thing is you need to replay it, but do not relive it. Write down what went wrong. Like, make a bullet list. There's actually studies that show that when we journal, it actually cuts rumination 25%. Meaning, like, we are not sitting thinking about it. Like, we actually pull it out of our heads, paper to pen. And I like paper to pen because it is a full cognitive exercise. Something about typing it is not the same as like holding the pen in your hand, forcing the pen to move in a direction to create a letter, which then creates a word, which then creates a sentence, which is kind of beautiful and magical because it came from a bunch of firing neurons in your head of how you felt. So if you can, when you can, paper to pen, write it down. Write it down as raw as possible. Nobody needs to see it or read it. You don't need to like bring it to therapy. Like, get it out of your head because it will cut down on you replaying it in an unhealthy way. The next thing, the most important question, and this is the difference in my mind between therapy and coaching and why I've shifted away from therapy more into this coaching mentality, is not the question of why did this happen? It's what next? That is my favorite question. I think that why question sometimes robs us and steals us of energy and motivation and this ability to allow ourselves to move forward. Asking what's next shifts from I suck to, okay, what can I do better next time? And it really, truly redirects the brain from digging into shame or emotions because, like, I gotta be honest, what am I going to do? Why am I going to dive into why beyond just figuring out like the bullet points that I need to figure out what next? If you're not asking yourself what next, then there is no action step forward. I'm going to go on a tangent. Even when I'm fighting with my husband, even when Jimmy and I get into our kerfuffles, right? In our moments, I might be so angry and I might be like rehashing things. And listen, like I do this for a living and I still do that. So just know that if you're like trying to have better communication, even the expert in the room sometimes struggles with it. So when you're in that moment or when I'm in that moment, I try to pull back and I try to say like, okay, where do we go from here? We have voiced our opinions. We are at an impasse or a crossroads, or we both feel this way. What do we need to do next? Because that to me is the most important question in our relationship, is not why are we having this fight necessarily. I think like why we keep having this fight, sure. But like, what do we do about it? That to me is a wildly important question. Okay, tangent over, back to what we can take away from this and what we can do with it. So I want you to replay it, don't relive it. I want you to ask what's next. And I want you, this is going to feel unnatural, but I want you to try to do it anyway. I want you to celebrate your flop. I want you, I know how that sounds. I want you to truly find humor in the fuck up, because we see tons of research about how humor can boost dopamine. It can ease the sting. It can bring us closer. We can laugh about it with a friend. Like, there's something really wonderful about being like, well, that didn't go well, right? Like, or, oh my God, dude, remember that time you got up there and got drunk and tried to sing Whitney Houston and you thought you were excellent, but then you saw it played back on TikTok? Like, that was hysterical, right? Like, there's something about humor, bringing that into a situation, not to make fun of yourself, but I think allowing the situation to be a human moment, allowing the situation to be exactly what it is, a trial and an error, perhaps, probably. Laugh at yourself. Life isn't that serious. What's that quote? Like, you don't stop taking it so seriously. Nobody survives it anyway. Like, whatever it is, like, laugh about it. It's okay to not have it all together. You can laugh about it and, amazing, watch, you can laugh and you can also get better from it. You can laugh about it and still take it seriously. Those two things can absolutely still exist. Now, a bonus, do what you want with this, take this with you or not, but start small post-failure. Do a tiny win. There's lots of research about making your bed, like having something ticked off the to-do list, showing physical progress after a failure. It absolutely rewires confidence. Studies show it. I've seen it. I tell my clients to do it. After a failure, F word, I want you to do something small that's a win that you can accomplish very quickly, very easily, low stakes. It will 100% boost your confidence and rewire your brain in that moment that, like, I am not a fuck up. I fucked up at this one thing, and it is not the totality of who I am. Because that is really important as well. Not attaching the thing that you fucked up with your entire identity. It's okay to have fucked up in a thing. It's not okay to call yourself a fuck up because you had a fucked up moment. Right? Right? Don't we need to be a little bit kinder to ourselves? With all that said, next time you fuck up, just know, hear my voice. You've got this. And science says that you are built to bounce back from it. As always, I am here on Fridays, and I will catch you next week with a new F word here on Feelings and Other F Words. Talk to you soon. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.